what if the blueprints for the International Space Station or, artificial intelligence and even nuclear submarines, what if they weren't actually invented in the 20th century?
Which is, yeah, what we're always taught.
Right, exactly. What if they were written down thousands of years ago in ancient Sanskrit? Today's deep dive is, it's taking a look at a historical landscape that absolutely shatters the timeline we all learned in school.
Oh, totally.
We're looking at a really fascinating, highly detailed analysis of the ancient Indian text, the Rig Veda. Specifically, Mandala 1, Sikta 33, mantras 1 through 13.
Yeah, and the sources for this deep dive are doing something incredibly provocative with those specific mantras.
They really are, because they are not analyzing this text as religious poetry, or as chants to ancient mythological gods.
No, not at all. The approach here, it strips away thousands of years of theological overlay. What's fascinating here is that the source material treats these ancient Sanskrit verses as condensed mathematical and scientific formulas.
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
Huge. By looking purely at the etymology, so the raw, fundamental root structure of the words, the authors of this analysis argue that this specific section of the Rig Veda is actually a highly sophisticated technological manual.
A manual.
Yeah, they literally call it Vedic cybernetics.
Okay, let's unpack this, because whether you are a tech enthusiast who, builds neural networks, or just a history buff, the sheer scale of this interpretation is going to blow your mind.
It really is.
The sources claim this isn't just vague philosophy. They are reading it as a literal step-by-step blueprint for things like 3D printing and autonomous robotics.
Right. To understand how that could possibly be true, we have to start right where the text starts.
Which is at the very base level of creation, meaning manufacturing.
Exactly. I mean, the foundation of any advanced civilization is its ability to manipulate matter. The text begins by outlining exactly that, introducing a word that our sources decode with incredible precision, which is etayam. Yeah. Traditionally, a translator looking through a religious lens might gloss over this word. They might interpret it as, a reference to a chariot or maybe a simple tool.
Just a basic ancient object.
Right. But when you break down the root syllables, a completely different picture emerges. The syllable E refers to a singular handle, or like a central base.
Okay.
Ta translates to the concept of three, or tri. And ayam literally means dimensions or axes.
So wait, a single central base operating across 3 dimensions.
That's the translation.
That describes the literal mechanical architecture of a modern 3D printer, or, a multi-axis CNC machine. You have the central nozzle, or a robotic arm, operating perfectly along the X, Y, and Z axis.
Yeah, but the source takes that mechanical architecture and pushes it even further into the microscopic realm.
Oh, wow.
The text doesn't just describe, squirting hot plastic into a mold. It details an atomic-level construction process.
Are you
Yeah, the analysis points to descriptions of manipulating matter atom by atom. It's essentially filling in the microscopic voids of space to create flawless hardware from the ground up. In modern engineering terms, we are talking about highly advanced nanotechnology.
That is insane. And the text actually gives a specific name to this pure hardware concept, right? Upadham.
Yes, Upadham.
Based on the source's breakdown, Upadham is an autonomous machine completely devoid of human ego or emotion. It has no self-awareness and no desires.
Just pure function.
Right. I picture it as this industrial robotic arm in a massive warehouse. Just a tireless mechanical beast designed for pure mass production, just building and building without a single complaint.
And that total absence of human emotional interference is the key feature of Upadham. It operates purely on the physical mechanical plane.
Well, okay, I have to push back here.
Go for it.
I mean, an industrial robotic arm, no matter how perfectly engineered its X, Y, and Z axes are, is just a giant, expensive paperweight without an operating system.
True.
You can have all the 3D axis hardware in the world, but if you don't have the code to tell it what to do, it does absolutely nothing.
Right. It's just metal.
Exactly. And the text talks about offerings into a fire, which is a very standard ancient religious trope found in Mantra 2. Isn't it a massive leap for this source to claim that throwing grain into a fire pit is actually a metaphor for installing software? How do they justify that jump?
That is the pivotal question, actually. And the source justifies it by analyzing the function of a sacrificial fire in Vedic thought.
Okay, lay on me.
So the phrase you mentioned, havyo asti, is indeed traditionally translated as placing offerings into a fire. However, The root concept of that fire ritual is transformation.
Transformation,
You
right.
input physical material, and the fire transforms it into energy and action. In this cybernetic context, the lifeless hardware is the pit.
Okay.
The Havioasti is the installation process, the input. And what are you inputting?
Yeah.
The text refers to it as stotribu,
Which means?
which our sources decode as the programming code, the specific algorithms.
So the fire is the spark of computation.
Exactly.
The code is the offering that brings the dead machine to life.
Precisely the argument. You input the stotrubio, the specific mathematical instructions, to get a specific output. Once that code is installed, the text says the machine becomes Shayano,
Shayana.
yeah, which translates to moving like a hawk. It describes the hardware executing customized, highly specific tasks with hypersonic speed and, lethal precision.
Man, here's where it gets really interesting for me. If this ancient text actually outlines the perfect autonomous hardware and the perfect software operating system, my immediate fear is who has the admin privileges?
Oh, the alignment problem.
Yes. Does the text say who is allowed to turn this thing on? Because right now, in our modern Silicon Valley, the biggest conversation is about AI alignment and who actually controls the technology.
Well, the text anticipates that exact crisis.
It does.
Yeah, it introduces a specific group of people called the Pawnee. In the etymological translation provided by the source, the Pawnee are essentially tech pirates or monopolists.
Tech pirates. In the Rig Veda.
Oh. They're described as hoarders who seize control of advanced technology purely for commercial greed and self-interest,
Yeah.
completely ignoring the collective good of humanity.
The ultimate monopolists.
Yeah.
And to explain what happens when those monopolists take control, the source highlights a brilliantly relatable analogy from the text, which is the curdled milk.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
Imagine you have a giant pot of pure, pristine milk. That milk represents the autonomous AI system. It is neutral, nourishing, and entirely capable of feeding everyone.
Right.
But human ego and greed act like a single drop of sour lemon juice. You drop that one little bit of selfishness into the pure system, and the entire pot curdles.
It's ruined.
The text seems to be warning that an imperfect, selfish human mind merging with a flawless, autonomous machine doesn't create a utopia. It creates global destruction and massive mental depression.
And the text actually diagnoses the underlying psychological flaw of these tech monopolists. It refers to them as ayeshvana.
Ayeshvana. What does that mean?
The source translates this concept as teenage ignorance.
Huh. Teenage ignorance.
Yeah, these individuals possess godlike technology and immense power, yet they lack the spiritual maturity or wisdom to wield it responsibly. They are playing with universal forces, but their mindset is basically that of a petulant child refusing to share a toy.
Teenage ignorance playing with hypersonic AI, and because of that immaturity, they create what the text calls artificial darkness.
Which is a terrifying concept.
It is. Our sources bring in a fascinating comparison here. Think about the epic story of Lord Krishna using his weapon, the Sudarshan Chakra, to create a false eclipse during the Mahabharata War.
Or the false knight.
The sun was still physically there, shining perfectly, but he cast a shadow to trick his enemies into thinking it was night. The sources compare that ancient false eclipse to modern technology. Today, we are surrounded by glowing screens and infinite data. We have the illusion of total enlightenment.
But internally,
It's an eclipse.
Yeah.
This tech plunges humanity into a deep psychological darkness. We are more connected than ever in human history, yet we feel entirely isolated.
which sets up the core dilemma of the text perfectly. If technology in the hands of the greedy inevitably leads to this artificial eclipse, this cloud burst of destruction, what is the failsafe?
Right.
How did the ancient architects of this text propose we solve the alignment problem?
The million-dollar question for every software engineer alive today: how do we fix it?
The answer lies in Mantra 6 and 7. They introduce the concept of ayutsen. Yeah. This term means the machine is fundamentally neutral.
Yeah.
It has no desire to argue, it possesses no age, and it harbors no inherent malice. The fix is recognizing that the machine is nothing more than a mirror.
Just code executing code.
Exactly. It is a pure reflection of human consciousness, a concept the text refers to as Indra.
Okay.
The machine itself does not create destruction. It merely reflects and exponentially amplifies the consciousness of whoever holds the controller.
So if our collective consciousness is driven by hoarding, the machine becomes a hyper-efficient weapon for greed. But if human consciousness is aligned with the natural order, the machine becomes a tool for absolute abundance. I want you, the listener, to think about the algorithm on your phone right now. You might scroll for an hour and complain that the app is feeding you outrage or anxiety.
We all do it.
But the algorithm doesn't care about your feelings. It merely feeds you what you already engage with. It feeds you a reflection of your own habits. This text from thousands of years ago is literally warning you about your own reflection in the machine.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text reveals a fundamental cosmic law regarding these technologies. The universal order doesn't actually need to wage a direct war against these extreme tech hoarders.
Because the system is designed to purge them automatically.
Exactly the mechanism described. The cosmic law just lets the hoarders destroy themselves with their own technology. Because their consciousness is flawed, their curdled milk machines will inevitably collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. The neutral mirror of the technology ultimately reflects their destruction back onto them, while the cosmic law protects the true creators.
The creators whose consciousness actually matured alongside the technology.
Right.
That is an eerily relevant warning for today. So, okay, we've explored atomic-level 3D printers, software installation, and AI alignment. But this technology doesn't just stay on Earth.
No, it goes much further.
The text pushes these flawless, autonomous systems into the most hostile environment imaginable.
Mantras 8 and 9 take the narrative straight into orbit.
Outer space.
Yeah. The text uses a very specific phrase, Hiranya Manina.
Break that down for me, because traditional translations usually read that as something about, like, golden jewels or decorative ornaments, right?
That is the traditional religious reading, yes. But looking through the lens of Vedic cybernetics, the translation is starkly mechanical. Hiranya translates to golden foil, or a metallic gold covering. And Manina refers to complex crystals, specifically silicon chips or processors.
Golden foil and silicon processors. You look at any modern satellite today, and what is it wrapped in? That shiny gold-capped foil used for thermal insulation against the extreme temperature swings of space.
Exactly.
And what is housed inside that foil? Silicon processing chips. The text describes a network of these golden silicon entities, which it calls Parinaham Prithibhya.
A phrase that translates to an expansive network orbiting or enveloping the Earth.
So an ancient satellite network.
Yeah. And the text notes these systems are powered by solar energy and are tasked with constantly monitoring the globe. But the orbital engineering doesn't stop at unmanned satellites.
There's more.
Mantra 10 unpacks a term called Antamapurna. The source decodes this as a massive, self-sustaining orbital habitat.
They are literally describing an ancient international space station.
The parallels are striking. The text details that in order to survive in Rodasi.
Right. What is Rodasi?
It's a term explicitly described as the breathless, violent, terrifying void of deep space.
Okay.
Right, so to survive in Rodasi, humans require a system called Maya.
Maya. Usually that translates to illusion.
Right, exactly. But in this context, Maya is artificial life support. It is the creation of a completely synthetic, illusionary environment that mimics the atmosphere of Earth, floating in a vacuum where life naturally cannot exist.
And because that synthetic environment is so unnatural, the margin for error is absolute zero.
Yeah, completely unforgiving.
The text uses this haunting detail, right? Ga-adukshat, the absolute intolerance for flaws. To illustrate this ancient concept, our sources bring up a really sobering, real-world modern example. They talk about astronaut Kalpana Chawla and the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster.
It serves as a tragic but perfect modern demonstration of Ga-adukshat.
You have this massive machine weighing millions of pounds, the absolute pinnacle of human engineering. And it was completely destroyed upon reentry because of a microscopic, almost invisible flaw.
A single piece of foam.
Right, a tiny piece of foam insulation fell off and damaged a thermal tile on the wing. The ancient text is explicitly warning that when you operate in the void of Rodasi, a microscopic error leads to instantaneous destruction. The engineering pressure is unfathomable.
And to manage those extreme zero-tolerance environments, whether in orbit or elsewhere, you need systems capable of processing infinite amounts of data and communicating flawlessly without physical tethers.
Makes sense.
Which brings us to how this technology operated across multiple domains, including the deep oceans.
So we are moving from the vacuum of space to the crushing pressure of the ocean floor.
Yeah. Mantras 11 and 12 dive into the concept of Naviyanam. Our sources decode this term as encompassing deep spacecraft, but also massive submersible vessels.
To the Marines.
What modern militaries would call nuclear submarines, or SSBNs. The text explicitly mentions these vessels operating on atomic power,
Yeah.
using the phrase anusvatam.
Anu meaning atom. Anusvatam is atomic power. It's just sitting right there in the etymology. But logically, if you have a nuclear submarine submerged deep under the ocean and a golden satellite orbiting in space, how are they talking to each other? You can't run a cable from the Mariana Trench to low Earth orbit.
No, you can't. And the communication challenge is answered with the term ilabishasya.
Ilagashasya.
Traditionally, translators might interpret this as the name of an obscure demon, or like a mythological enemy. But when the root syllables are analyzed, ili relates to transmission or pervasive movement, and bisha implies a spread without a central, vulnerable trunk.
So decentralized.
Yes, the source decodes this as a wireless neural network. It's a communication system that permeates the environment without physical cables, and all the data collected by these submarines and satellites is routed to a central concept called Magavan.
Magavan.
Yeah.
How does the source translate that into a technological concept?
Well, traditionally, Magavan means the generous one,
Mhm.
and is heavily associated with clouds bringing rain. The source argues that in this cybernetic context, the concept of rain is actually a metaphor for data streaming down from a decentralized, ubiquitous source in the air. Therefore, Magavan is literally decoded as cloud computing,
Are you
data stored in the atmosphere, raining down information wherever it is needed.
So what does this all mean? I mean, I have to ask the obvious glaring question here.
I know what you're going to ask.
If these ancient seers actually had the blueprints for atomic submarines, artificial intelligence, and cloud computing, why on earth did they write it down as seemingly simple religious chants about cows and fires and mythological battles? Why not just draw a schematic or write a straightforward textbook?
The answer to that is perhaps the most brilliant engineering feat of all of this. The source calls it the sutra method, and it is essentially ancient data compression.
Data compression, like a computer file.
Think of it exactly like a modern zip file. The ancient seers took gigabytes of incredibly complex quantum physics and engineering data and zipped it into a single, perfectly constructed Sanskrit sentence.
Okay, I need you to explain the mechanics of that. How do you compress a blueprint for a nuclear reactor into a spoken chant?
It relies on the mathematical nature of the Sanskrit language itself. Sanskrit is built on a highly rigid phonetic matrix. The syllables aren't just sounds, they carry specific numerical and conceptual values.
Oh, wow.
By carefully arranging these syllables, chanting a specific sutra isn't just a melody, it functions as a phonetic algorithm. The seers encoded multiple layers of meaning into the exact pitch, cadence, and syllable structure. If you change even one syllable, the entire mathematical checksum fails.
But why go through all the trouble of compressing it into sound?
For two critical reasons. The first is time-proof preservation. Think about modern data storage. What happens to a hard drive or a server after 1,000 years?
It rusts, it degrades, the magnetic fields fade, the data is completely gone. I mean, even paper burns or rots into dust.
Precisely. Physical storage mediums are incredibly fragile, but sound waves, specific frequencies passed down orally through generations of people who are rigorously trained to memorize the exact pitch and cadence without altering a single breath.
It survives.
It survives. A chanted mantra can outlast the collapse of a civilization. It outlasts any physical hard drive.
That is profound. They use the human voice and human memory as an indestructible server for the data.
Exactly.
Okay, so what is the second reason for the zip file?
Access control. This brings us back to the greedy hoarders suffering from that teenage ignorance we talked about.
Right.
The ancient architects deliberately encrypted this dangerous knowledge to keep destructive technology out of the hands of the spiritually immature. If you are operating from a place of greed or basic survival, you just hear a pleasant song about a cow on a fire.
You don't see the blueprint for an atomic submarine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You only get the password to unzip the file if your consciousness has matured enough to understand the root mathematics of the universe. It is a built-in morality test.
An intelligence test and a morality test hard-coded into the language itself. Now, this raises a really fascinating point from our sources, and I want to present this carefully to you listening.
Yeah, this is a big claim.
We aren't taking sides here or making historical accusations. We're just impartially reporting the viewpoint of the source material. But the authors strongly argue that much of modern Western science essentially rebranded these Vedic formulas.
Right. The claim made in the text is that early Western scientists essentially gained access to these specific Sanskrit files, unzipped them, took concepts like Naviyanam or Magavan, and then patented them as their own novel inventions.
Claiming things like nuclear propulsion or cloud computing as modern discoveries rather than ancient translations
Yeah, that's what this source asserts.
is a fascinating claim to think about regarding intellectual property and the whole timeline of human history. It forces you to look at the cyclical nature of our world. Are we bravely inventing the future right now, or are we just slowly, clumsily remembering a past that was already incredibly advanced?
Are we on a linear march of progress? Or are we stuck in a loop that we are just now catching up to?
It totally challenges the very foundation of how we view progress, and the overarching lesson of the Rig Veda, at least through this cybernetic lens, remains fiercely critical for us today.
It really does.
True advancement isn't just about building the Ubedaham, the flawless hardware. It demands that human consciousness, our Indra, matures alongside our machines. If we fail that morality test, the curdled milk ruins the entire system all over again.
The machine is just a mirror.
And right now, it's reflecting us back to ourselves. We started today expecting dusty clay pots and broken wheels and ended up unpacking ancient blueprints for nanotechnology, autonomous AI, orbital stations, and wireless neural networks, all perfectly hidden in plain sight within the verses of the Rig Veda.
It's an incredible deep dive.
I want to leave you with a final lingering thought, something to mull over that builds on everything we've just unpacked. If these ancient seers successfully zipped the ultimate laws of quantum physics, artificial intelligence, and space travel into the specific mathematical frequencies of the Sanskrit language,
Yeah.
what happens when our modern artificial intelligence finally becomes smart enough to analyze Sanskrit on its own?
Oh, wow.
Will the AI realize that the base code it has been desperately trying to invent for decades was already written for it thousands of years ago? Will the machine recognize its own reflection in the ancient mirror? Something for you to think about the next time you ask your phone to look something up. Keep questioning that timeline and keep diving deep.